Top of the morning to you. John TheMorgile here, checking in for a live stream. That's what it is. Just wanted to hang out with you guys for a bit and go over a few things that I've been contemplating and see what y'all think. So one love, good morning. Hope y'all are having a blessed day. Bear with me here while I get this thing set up. All right, looks like we're live, loud, and clear. And if you don't mind, give us a big old thumbs up to let me know you can hear me. I would appreciate it. Arkosh, good morning, sir. 5x5, good to hear, good to hear. What's up, Orwell? Orwell mañana. Orwell tomorrow. Yeah. So let's see here. I do appreciate you guys coming to hang out with me. It's always nice to see y'all here in the live stream. So the sort of subtitle of this stream is going to be life-altering incidents beyond our control to foresee or avoid. Right? It's amazing to me how our memories work sometimes. You know, at times we can forget like what we ate for dinner yesterday, but then other instances will stick with us really for the rest of our lives. Like when I was really little, choked on a strawberry, flatlined, and then was resuscitated by my grandfather. And even though I was barely 2 years old, I remember that like it was yesterday, very vividly. Hey, Stephen Landry, what's up, buddy? And, you know, I guess you could say my soul went to another realm briefly where, you know, I was sentient, present, but definitely out of body. And what strikes me in retrospect as kind of strange about the whole thing is, you know, when I was in that other place, it didn't strike me as weird at all that I didn't have a body, right? Because you would think that being sentient and being present, but not in your body, you would think that would strike you as odd, at least, but it didn't. It seemed perfectly normal, perfectly natural. I mean, I guess kind of like strange things seem normal and natural while you're dreaming. It was similar to that. And I could probably go into a little more detail about what that was like, but, you know, when I was choking out, you know, on the strawberry before I crossed over, I was like terrified. It was so painful, and I had, you know, had never choked before, so I didn't even know what that was. And then, you know, suddenly the pain was just gone, and I went to this other place, right? I guess you could say place. And again, I remember that day like it was yesterday, mainly because of that terrible pain that I experienced coming back into my body. Like, I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, again, I wasn't even 2 years old probably, but I had what is known as a near-death experience. And since that experience, I've had, you know, firsthand understanding that the physical realm is not all that there is, right? That's not a matter of faith or belief. I mean, it's nothing that I could necessarily prove to anybody, but you know, I'll attest to it, I'll swear to it that, you know, that the physical realm ain't all that there is. And then, you know, of course, little did I know that I would have another near-death experience way later on in my life. So like almost 10 years ago, like getting right up on 10 years ago. So it was October 10th, 2014. I was on my way home from one of my employees' house. Yeah, I had like 4 or 5 employees at the peak of my little small business. But so it was cold and raining that day, and I put on my helmet, trusty leather jacket, got on my motorbike, and started driving home. Beyond halfway home, it was like a 20-minute drive or whatever. I was going by the Food Lion, the one that I usually would shop at. Through the red light, it was green for me, but through the red light in the Food Lion parking lot, Food Lion was on my right. And, of course, my light was green all the way. The driver of an older model Acura Sports Coupe drove out of the parking lot at Food Lion to turn right on red at that red light, just as I was passing through the green light adjacent. Now, excuse me, instead of stopping at his red light, he blew through the light, to go right on red. And it's probably something that we've all done once or twice, right? But there is valid reason why you're supposed to come to a complete stop, look both ways, and of course, pay attention, right? Pay attention for motorcycles, pedestrians, whatever, before proceeding with caution to do right on red. Like, there are some rules, that we're supposed to adhere to. Now, I understand the dude didn't see me. At least I hope he didn't see me. I'm sure he didn't. Driving through the green light, and, it wasn't like an evil thing that he did. He was just barely bending the rules a little by failing to stop at the red light and then turn right. And he barely bent the rules by like messing around on his phone as well while he was making that turn, besides the point. The only reason that I know he was messing around on his phone was because the last thing I remember seeing when my face slammed into his windshield was the dude intently focusing on his cell phone, probably texting or something, not regarding the road before him in the slightest. And so I slammed into his front windshield face first, smashing it into like a spider's web of glass. And the impact of my head and upper body hitting the windshield square front on, it caused me to like bounce back, reeling from a surprisingly violent shock. So I instinctively began to like tuck and roll. I used to play football, and I even grew up with an older brother, so I know how to take a hit. But this was by far like the hardest I've ever been hit. I was actually surprised at how hard the hit was, because I had, like a split second to brace for it, and I was expecting it. And it was surprising how hard the hit was, because we weren't really going that fast. I mean, he might have got up to 25 or 30 by the time, the front of his car clipped my rear wheel. So I started going wonky and tried to avoid him coming up my right side. And I remember thinking just at that moment, before I came off the bike, I'm like, damn, I thought that was going to hit me. And then that's when it actually hit me. So after I rolled and, avoided being under the car somehow, I tried to stand up and get out of the way, because I knew that there were other cars on the road coming up behind me. But like, as I was standing up, I remember starting to see stars, and then I just passed out. Apparently I fell back over because I woke up on the ambulance on the way to the hospital. So luckily, it was cold and raining that day. So I was wearing my full face helmet and a leather jacket, along with, I think I was even wearing 2 pairs of pants. So, I did have some degree of protection. To my motorcycle riders out there, y'all, please, for your own good, put on that PPE, man. It will save your life. If nothing else, if anybody out there's listening that rides a bike, I know certain state laws are different from state to state. Like, you don't necessarily legally have to wear a helmet or whatever, but I would just urge y'all to do so. If I can convince you of anything, wear the PPE. The arm of the leather jacket I was wearing had been totally ripped off the jacket, just hanging by a thread. And, that would have been my arm. had I not been wearing the jacket. So that definitely helped. The full face mask helmet had been like snapped in two right here, and then the visor was disconnected from the hinges on one side. So it was pretty violent. Like it's hard to break one of those helmets. So, you know, I was very lucky to survive that. And frankly, you know, if it hadn't have been raining and cold that day, I might have just been wearing like a t-shirt without a helmet, and I'm certain that it would have killed me, like no question. So again, if nothing else, for those of you listening that, you know, the guys out there, gals too, that ride a motorbike, I don't care how well you drive or how tough you are, wear the PPE, y'all. It will save your life or save you from getting maimed. If you ever find yourself at the mercy of one of these unavoidable collision situations, right? So long story short, I was able to sue the driver's insurance company, which ultimately netted $25,000. I probably could have held out for more, but that was the ultimate settlement. And the lion's share of that went to the lawyer, the ambulance, and the hospital. All in all, I got to keep less than $3,000 of the settlement because, you know, the lawyer takes a third off the top. And somehow it was decided that the hospital and the ambulance got to keep over $12,000 of that for like it was a 7-minute ambulance ride and, you know, so-called health care that I received when I got to the hospital. Oh, here. Sorry, here you go. It's worth mentioning, you know, the care that I received at the hospital. You know, what exactly does almost $13,000 in medical price gouging terms look like, right? Because of the fact that I didn't have any health insurance and I didn't have the driver's insurance information in my hand when I arrived at the hospital, what they did exactly was they drove me to the hospital. It was less than 5 minutes away in the ambulance. I think they charged like $6,000 or $7,000 for that ambulance ride. They wheeled my gurney into the ER and they parked it in the hallway of the ER. And I fell asleep at some point because I woke up in the gurney in the hallway of the ER and a few hours had gone by. And I asked one of the nurses, like, when was I going to be seen by a doctor? Because up to that point, I hadn't been seen. And I was indeed just still sitting there in the gurney in the hallway. It was almost as if they had just totally forgotten about me sitting there, right? And anybody that's been to the ER can attest to that. I think I'm not the only one that has been sort of wheeled into the hallway and then forgotten about, right? Luckily, I didn't have any internal bleeding or anything, right? But doctor finally came in, talked with me for probably less than a minute, certainly less than 2 minutes, and basically sent me home with some cracked ribs, nerve damage in my back, and spine messed up due to just being physically, you know, hit by a car. It wasn't like a car hit my car hit me, right? They didn't do any x-rays, didn't run any tests, nothing. So, you know, and I'm certain if they would have known that the driver of the car had insurance and he was obviously at fault, they probably could have found tons of other stuff to ring up and bill to the, you know, to Nationwide, which was his insurance company. But because of the circumstances that day, they just literally left me in the hallway to die, you know, as far as they knew, prescribed some pain meds and booted me out the door to make room for someone with a more lucrative, you know, insurance situation or whatever. And at the end of all that, maybe like a year later, they got about, what, $13,000 off the top of that insurance check. So the hospital and the ambulance did very well for themselves that day. Me, not so much, right? And I probably could have fared better, you know, monetarily out of the situation had I done things a little differently, but I followed the advice of a friend, which is another story altogether. And besides the main point that I wanted to get to here. But let's just say that this auto accident that wasn't my fault in the slightest, that I had no way to foresee or avoid, I was merely on the way home from doing a favor for a friend. But that accident changed my life so profoundly, so immeasurably. It's really difficult to say, what my life would be like right now had it never happened. Like, I really don't know. But it puts things in perspective. While we certainly try to do the right thing and, be a decent person and drive carefully, eat right, don't smoke, exercise, whatever. Every day, let's not forget that every day there are decent, honest, hardworking people who will tragically end their story on like the highway, on the way to school, or on their way home from work, or like choke on a strawberry or something, whatever. I would just hope that it's on like a Monday morning as opposed to a Friday evening, but whatever, just saying. But the old adage or the old cliche that we're never guaranteed tomorrow or we're not promised tomorrow is so true. And, we can try to do all the right things. We can try to make informed decisions and just do our damnedest to stay out of trouble and stay out of harm's way. But, again, there's no guarantees. And the point to all of this, I'm getting there, I promise, is to say that, in this example, I feel lucky to be alive. And also, had it not been for that accident, my life would have been way different. Had I been driving down that road 10 seconds sooner or 10 seconds later, I wouldn't have been hit. On the other hand, had it not been cold and raining that day, I probably would have been killed because I might not have worn a helmet or whatever, which I would have done from time to time at that point. I don't even ride motorbikes at all, certainly not on public roads anymore after that. Because, it doesn't matter how well you drive, it's the other geniuses that you really need to worry about, My home-based business was brought to naught as a result of that accident directly. It truthfully altered the trajectory of my life to a degree that's difficult to grasp. I strongly believe that I never would have stumbled across flat Earth had that accident never happened. I certainly would have gotten into it in 2015 at any rate. So, in retrospect, I'm actually very grateful for that accident. I feel like coming to terms with flat Earth is worth getting hit by a car any old day of the week, as it's the most profound and important change I've ever experienced in my life, bar none. And, as an extension of that, I've tried my damnedest to help others see the truth about flat Earth. And, there's no way that I could keep such a wonderful and profoundly life-altering revelation to myself. Although my reputation and familial relationships have suffered, I wouldn't have it any other way, truly. And, I'm grateful in spite of the residual nerve damage in my back that will probably never go away, prevents me from operating at full capacity. I simply can't do a lot of the things I used to do easily. When we're in good shape, we tend to take our health for granted, which we should be careful not to do. With all that said, my faith in the Most High, creator of all things, God, if you will, is much stronger as a result of experiencing such miracles. If you can call being hit by a car a miracle, I think it was. Sometimes God will bless us with a stumbling block to put us on a course right where we need to be. And I do have strong faith that, everything happens for a reason, and the Most High will never give us more than we can handle. Sometimes the hand of God moving in our lives goes unnoticed until we're able to contemplate it, seemingly unrelated events in retrospect. And, I've found that the Most High works miracles in open and in secret, and always comes through for us right on time. Maybe not on our schedule, but, right on time. His timing is perfect. And again, I hate to harp, but it baffles the mind for me to contemplate how much different things would be if, say, I would have stuck around Clifford's house for lunch that day instead of leaving directly. And it helps me realize that while we don't always have the capacity to acknowledge the miracles that God puts in our lives, I do believe he has a plan. And sometimes we just need to put our faith in God and trust that his wisdom transcends our ability to recognize it, right? Now, could I have possibly seen the miracle involved with being hit by that car in 2014 at that time? No, absolutely not. There's no way. In fact, I saw that accident at the time as the worst, definitely one of the worst things that ever happened to me at the time. I mean, the timing was absolutely terrible. I lost long-term clients because of it. And again, it altered the trajectory of my life very profoundly. And it certainly puts things in a different perspective. I believe that incident specifically put me on track to stumble across the revelation involving the great deception of heliocentric proportions, right? Because once you come to terms with the fact that the heliocentric model is a huge deception, really, I think designed to drive a wedge between us and the creator, whose signature is everywhere. It unlocks a part of us that was dormant up to that point. Up to the point of that accident, I was personally entrenched in some really quite bizarre contemplations and conspiracy theories, which are presented across modern media with no disclaimers, for sure, right? So like, where was I at prior to stumbling across Flat Earth in 2015-ish? I was certainly a Christian, but I had a tough time taking the Bible seriously as, it was written by ancients who believed the earth was flat, fixed, and immovable, the dummies, right? At that time, I was definitely convinced that, 9/11 was an inside job perpetrated on the unwitting public by members of PNAC. I was certainly convinced that ancient aliens were being covered up by the government because, they want to hide interstellar faster than light travel. I mean, I was definitely down that road. And I probably assumed that, Albert Einstein was the genius of our time. CERN was probably opening portals to other dimensions or galaxies. And, the British royal family were obviously reptilian shapeshifters from the constellation Draco, And while I never really subscribed to evolution, I mean, I guess maybe I did at a time, or like the Big Bang Theory, I fully believed that our planet Earth was merely a little speck of dust in the infinite cosmos. And all life, including human sentient life, we're just another species of animal, right? Although blessed with an immortal soul, I thought. I figured the Judeo-Christian Bible was a book written by well-meaning shepherds who didn't understand science and thus were inferior compared to our modern culture. We learned futuristic people, right? I had long assumed that life itself was apparently a chemical incident brought forth by chaotic mechanisms of chance and billions of years of evolution. The world itself was just one example of a planet capable of hosting life forms and may have been engineered or at least terraformed by some species of ancient alien astronauts long ago in the primordial past, right? The truth is, this world, our Earth, is probably the most important piece of real estate in all of creation. The world is, contrary to infinite space psyop theory, a unique sacred place, the centerpiece of the known creation, not an insignificant speck of dust wandering the vast sea of infinite space, as they convinced us all to believe since we were just little kids, right? All life is sacred, and even human emotions are very real. Not the consequence of just chemical reactions in our endocrine system, deluding us into the illusion of some higher power operating in our universe. while our modern culture has achieved truly amazing feats of technology and architecture, our understanding of history and science and anthropology and even the very ground that we walk upon is incomplete and misinformed. We've been deceived about so many things, starting with the very nature of our world, and thus, by extension, deceived about our true place in the grand scheme of things, which I think is a travesty. And I'm grateful to live during this time. Somehow or another, it appears that the benevolent forces once responsible for maintaining balance in our realm were potentially systematically snuffed out by what can only be described as evil forces high up in the structures, right? The upper echelons of our society. It does seem like our realm was once, long ago, defined by a highly advanced, spiritually attuned civilization responsible for the amazing architecture and jaw-dropping civil engineering projects that we see all over the world. And all of that is a testament to such a civilization's existence in the distant past. I mean, I think it's undeniable. Megalithic structures like the Great Pyramids in Egypt, China, the Americas, and practically every continent, but a few examples. There's so many mysterious and ancient megalithic sites across the plain, it's difficult to argue against the fact that a great civilization once held influence over every corner of this realm, right? From Angkor Wat in Cambodia to the great sites found along the Silk Road, from Eastern Asia through Africa to Europe, the world lacks not physical evidence for this ancient forgotten civilization. But what happened to them? Where did they go? Like, was there a intentional reset foisted upon them, or did they just sort of fizzle out into the echoes of time? I mean, we don't know what happened. We have cultural amnesia as to our past, and I think that's another one of these travesties, right? Every day I become more and more convinced that our realm was somehow overtaken by some really quite evil entities, again, sitting on high thrones and positions of wealth, power, and influence. These archonic entities don't operate in public per se, but they have like proxy frontmen and frontwomen who behave as a buffer between themselves and we, the unwashed masses, right? These archonic entities fill the highest seats of power in our realm, starting with the obvious things like finance, government, and the world militaries, right through to the supposedly spiritual trees like the Vatican, for a prime example. The hidden occult sect adorns whatever it controls with essentially sigil magic, for there is power in these symbols. Anyone who's studied the various fiat currencies of the world will find instances of the Illuminati equivalent to gang tags and sigils, which act as a way for them to like mark their territory and possibly even implant subconscious cues which affect we humans to varying degrees, I think. Anyone who's read the book Creature from Jekyll Island will understand that the monetary system is likely the most important arm of the beast system's control grid. They've openly been promoting, from our collective need for a currency, just poison to our collective society. They've been slowly siphoning away our wealth incrementally, little by little, using a clever hidden tax that we know as inflation. Inflation isn't by accident. It's built into the system on purpose, right? Professional financial academicians have been trained by the official education wing of the beast system. So, the majority of those boneheads fully believe that inflation is a perfectly normal and natural part of any economy, right? It's almost sacrilegious to suggest that the very official entity responsible for issuing our currency has been robbing us all blind for over 100 years. The so-called Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor does it hold any reserves, is a private, for-profit group of banks who create imaginary fiat currency out of thin air, lend it to the government and assorted governments across the world with interest tacked on. It's an obvious scam that if any one of us were caught trying to do what the Federal Reserve does, it would rightfully be called fraud and breach of trust and everything, and it would land us in prison for a long time. They'd probably put us under the jail, right? But since they are operating technically within the legal framework of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, they're well within the bounds of the letter of the law, and so they continue robbing us blind to this very day. It doesn't matter that the Federal Reserve Act was drafted in secret, behind the backs of Congress and the American people to our detriment. The law was passed then, and it still stands today, and so we're stuck with it forever. It doesn't matter that the Federal Reserve Charter was drafted under the condition that they were supposed to preserve the value of our currency and prevent inflation. And of course, since that point, the US dollar has lost over 95% of its value to inflation, demonstrating that the Fed is either an abject failure at best or a deliberate scam at worst. In either case, the Federal Reserve is, in my opinion, by far the #1 domestic enemy facing the American people and, yes, even the world. However, none of our so-called sharp and savvy politicians have mentioned anything about this scam that is the Fed. Really since JFK swore to eliminate the Fed and other such entities. And we all know what happened to JFK, right? Maybe we don't know, but I don't know. That's another topic altogether. I firmly believe that our realm holds the potential to support a bona fide utopia, heaven on earth, if we play our cards right. And with miracles involved, right? I mean, we're going to need some miracles, I think. Or, I think it could easily just as go entirely the other way, depending on how things are handled and what we do collectively right now. The question is, will our grandchildren be raised in a similarly deceptive system that we were? A system that will blockade strides towards free energy technology in favor of a capitalistic prison planet that just so happens to be extremely profitable for a very small percentage of corporations and their shareholders? Will we continue to entrench ourselves into trillions of dollars of debt so that the military-industrial complex can crank out machines of death and mass destruction? Will our great-grandchildren need to suffer sodium fluoride in their water supply as we do here in America? I mean, how long can we continue a situation where our #1 export here in America is war? I don't think we can do it for that long. Prisons without bars, indeed, DJD. Many of us feel like time is running short to alter our national trajectory towards a direction that will not end in catastrophe. It seems obvious that if we continue on with the current course, we're in deep trouble in terms of a future for, say, our great-grandchildren, right? It's not going to be enough just to vote one way or the other. I don't think this is something that can be handled by the current political structure. Indeed, we need the Most High on our side. And so long as we maintain our current course, we're only destined to bring his wrath, I think, right? So in that regard, I'm praying for miracles. We need miracles to stop our crazy, inept, arrogant government officials from just selling us all down the corporate river. Their policies, greed, and overall senseless shenanigans only assure our collective demise. The beast system we find ourselves in has been cleverly set up with fail-safes and is reinforced by the power structures of the status quo. By any standard secular metrics, I am personally obviously not a successful person, seeing how I'm borderline homeless, living in a hotel that I can't afford, and will soon be fully homeless once again. And my only way out of this is a trailer that I'm going to move into very soon. And I'm fine with that. But, it's like I'm financially ruined. My credit rating is in the shit tank, and I'm not getting any younger. Indeed, I have no delusions in terms of my life story being one of secular success, and I'm fine with that. But let's be honest, do any of us actually believe that the secular world would bring forth profound and paradigm-shattering truths? Would the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, or Bill Gates sacrifice their lucrative empires to expose the evil hooks of scientism or the heliocentric deception? I think not. When I first stumbled across Flat Earth and realized that it was the truth, I personally had no choice but to try and help as many people as I could come to terms with this amazing and life-changing revelation. And while my good name is permanently tarnished as a direct result of standing up for what I know to be right, I wouldn't have it any other way. So, if you want to take anything away from my little rant here today, besides motorcycle riders, wear your PPE, for real, take this. Put your faith in the Most High Creator of all things, God, if you will. The Holy Spirit will work miracles in your life, even if you don't recognize them immediately. Sometimes what appears to be a stumbling block in your path that causes you to trip over and bust your butt is a blessing in disguise, which you might not even be able to recognize ever, or at least maybe until like years later. In retrospect, hindsight is 20/20, right? So with all that said, I pray that y'all stay blessed and try to make moves in your life to help other people wake up to this amazing revelation that has changed so many of our lives for the better. Keep each other in prayers. Keep my family in prayers as we're facing hard times, as always, trying to escape this trap of living out of hotels and really know where to go. Hopefully we're at the end of this chapter of tribulations in our life, and I just pray that God shows mercy on us during these difficult times, and God's been good to us, I think. And while I don't see how this is exactly going to unfold, I do have faith that things will work out in the end. And I will just end this with a prayer. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not towards temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. All right, one love, you guys. Keep us in prayer, and I'll see you as soon as possible for more content. Y'all be good.